Welcome, everybody, to our presentation today, AI and the Law, Navigating Regulation. We're going to go ahead and get started. We've got two wonderful panelists with us today, Dr. Pouyan Esmaeil Zadeh and Dr. Miriam Weismann. But first, just wanted some quick facts about FIU, Florida International University, for those of you who are not from the local area. This presentation is being brought to you by Chapman's Graduate School of Business. And just some quick facts here in terms of, some information about us. Number 4 public university in the nation. Number 1 in real estate research productivity in the world. Number 4 international MBA program. And to boost, we have 25 plus graduate degree programs and doctoral programs within the College of Business at FIU. So we've got a lot of great offerings, but today we're here to discuss AI. And without further ado, we're going to go right into the presentation. I will turn it over to my friend, Dr. Miriam Weismann. Dr. Weismann?
Thank you, Andre. Appreciate it. And I'd like to again welcome all of you and thank you all for attending. Now, the topic of legal and ethical governance of AI takes us into some very uncharted territory. We start with the question facing the world today. And I mean, it is a global, not domestic question. What happens when technological innovation outpaces the ability of laws and regulations to keep up? And parenthetically, this isn't the first time we've had to ask this question. A lot of technical developments have brought us to this point in the past, but this is profoundly true with the development of artificial intelligence. Now, this phenomena of the law trailing behind technical development is called the pacing problem, and it has immense domestic and global ramifications for the governance of emerging technologies. While what to do about AI has become part of a greater legal debate, the pacing problem becomes the great equalizer in all of these debates and arguments because it forces governments to stop and to immediately take stock of what their approach to the regulation of these sectors and technologies will be. Now, today, in the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to discuss some of the legal challenges and potential for legal liability created by AI and what some of the global players have done, like the EU. What have they done to address these legal challenges? And where is the United States relative to these global players? Well, I won't keep you in suspense. The US is far behind. Now, from a civil law perspective, when one individual harms another, either intentionally or negligently, the injured person, our plaintiff, has recourse in the courts and can sue the defendant perpetrator of the harm. And you can sue for damages arising out of some action in what we call tort liability. Now, we're going to talk about the inherent risks in AI technology in a moment, but I want you to assume with me for just a second that we all have some AI and it malfunctions. And it causes harm to the public. And here's the question. Does the law give members of the public redress in the courts to legal damages for the harm done? Now, in the current legal system, one human being is accountable for damage to another human being. So what we're really asking here is, how should the law prescribe human accountability for the disruptive failure of AI machine technology? Well, here's where the law is at on this. AI is a non-sentient being. It's simply an unregulated algorithm with disruptive potential, and as such, completely falls outside of the current US regulatory framework. Because domestic and international law do not currently recognize AI as a subject, someone who is subject to the law, AI has no legal personality and cannot be held personally liable for damages. In fact, the US courts have held on previous occasions that a robot can't be sued, right? Only a person with a mind can be an agent in the law. The question then arises as to how to hold accountable the multiple corporate and non-corporate participants in the supply chain who create, market, and apply AI and create or contribute to the risk of harm in the first instance. Now, in the corporate setting, we've all sort of heard of the doctrine of corporate limited liability. It's the reason most business organizations become corporations. And there is a separate legal personality that protects entrepreneurial activity without the constant risk of legal liability and financial ruin. And we know that these legal doctrines positively foster free enterprise in a capitalistic society, but they can also serve to facilitate the evasion of responsibility and accountability. Accountability is resolved, particularly, say, in the healthcare context. Quote, the lack of accountability raises concerns about the possible safety consequences of using unverified or unvalidated AI in clinical settings, unquote. So a key takeaway here is that a known risk in tort law sets the stage for tort liability. But for whom, right? So given that safety and security are cataloged as known AI risks, regulation to address safety could be difficult to adequately craft if there's no regulatory deterrence in place to ensure human accountability for the safety hazards accounted for and occasioned by AI. So how do we find somebody who's going to be liable? Well, in the past, when we had an inherently dangerous product or service, you can go back to the slide. If we had an inherently dangerous product or service in a supply chain, we would go back and hold all of the participants in the supply chain responsible. Now, holding every person or every business organization in the supply chain responsible is pursuant to rules called attribution, where the law attributes liability for a faulty product or service to everyone in the supply chain. Now, if we think about the AI supply chain, it might include the person paying for its design, right? The one who commissions it, the designer of the system, the person who writes the AI design, the software programmer, the person or business organization who licenses or distributes the system, the organization who integrates, installs, or configures the system, the one who tests the system, the person who trains the system or supplies the data to train that system. It could include the owner of the AI system or the hardware, or the operator of the AI system. So these are all the participants in the supply chain who could have future legal exposure. And yet, at this point in time, the law has still not applied supply chain liability to AI. Next slide. So I do want to talk about what the known risk is all about. Let's consider the safety risk in the context of an example. Let's take healthcare delivery. Now, we know that new technologies tend to be propelled into the marketplace by the exceedingly optimistic expectations of researchers and product developers regarding potential benefits. And there's a growing exuberance in applying large language models like ChatGPT in the healthcare industry to facilitate, for example, diagnostic activity. But is it safe? Well, the accuracy of ChatGPT algorithmic performance is still under research, and frankly, it's seldom addressed in the AI literature, touting its capability, and much of that literature is still subject to debate. But in a recent study conducted by Stanford University, the researchers found that the performance and behavior of both ChatGPT 3.5 and 4, quote, varied greatly over time. And they identified performance fluctuations as drift. Now, drift means that the behavior of the same LLM service can change all on its own substantially in a relatively short period of time, highlighting the need for continuous monitoring of LLMs. So drift is a term used in machine learning to describe how the performance of a machine learning model in production slowly gets worse over time. And this, of course, can happen for a number of reasons. The most common is that the data that the model was trained on becomes outdated or is no longer representing the current conditions. Now, while there are currently only a few published studies addressing the predictive accuracy of ChatGPT, performance in terms of simply making mistakes or engaging in drift, there is a growing body of literature that points to other weaknesses in the application of this algorithm as well. And these include things like outdated knowledge, insufficient understanding, malicious usage, bias and discrimination, lack of transparency, security, and privacy. And in fact, the National Institute of Health, the NIH, published a recent study that tested the accuracy of ChatGPT performance in medical knowledge dissemination. And here's what that study concluded. There was potential for the use of AI in healthcare, but it cautioned that any use of the current version of ChatGPT for medical knowledge dissemination must consider its capacity to come to a totally mistaken conclusion, which is delivered in an authoritative and very convincing manner. So, would the law hold the AI supply chain liable for the risk of, say, diagnosis caused by a drift? Or would the doctor be held legally responsible for, say, medical malpractice based on AI reliance? Next slide, please. Now, as I said a moment ago, machine learning models are trained with historical data. But once they're used in the real world, as we said, they can become outdated, lose their accuracy, and be subject to drift. And therefore, they become less accurate or they perform differently than they were originally designed to do. And if you take a look at the slide, you can see different variations of drift that can affect the performance and accuracy of AI. Again, as the model's predictions become less reliable, it can lead to consequences in the law. For example, in a healthcare setting, as we said a moment ago, it can lead to an incorrect diagnosis or treatment recommendations. Think about a financial setting. It could result in poor investment decisions, which takes us back to the legal principle that known risk can give rise in the law to legal liability. And next slide. And the known risks attributable to AI are legion. Now, I've talked about safety and security, but there are many other documented in the literature. And as one example, and I cite the article on the slide, researchers in this article did a literature review of 84 articles, and they identified 22 risks already raised by the use of AI. Again, if the risk is known and the technology is used, is there going to be legal liability as there would otherwise be for other known risks under current US law? Next slide, please. Now, there is another legal problem that has brewed up a recent storm. AI has been called a thief of protected copyright materials. Now, the US Copyright Office is right now trying to determine the applicability of the Copyright Act of 1790, which is the current law governing copyrights in the United States, to this new technology. And while it's going on and pondering, the legal application, well, businesses are already starting to sue. The New York Times sued OpenAI, the creator, and Microsoft, alleging that these companies are stealing its copyrighted content to train their large language models and then profiting from it. Now, this is the only first such challenge by a major American news organization over the use of artificial intelligence, but other lawsuits have since been filed. Now, you might say, well, look, one defense to theft of intellectual property is known as the fair use doctrine. Now, fair use is a doctrine in the US that permits the limited use of copyrighted material without first having to acquire permission from the copyrighted holder. Fair use historically was intended to balance the interests of copyright holders with the public interest in the wider distribution and use of created works by allowing as a defense to copyright infringement claims. But the problem here is that no one knows what is fair use when AI is involved. In short, this has been characterized as a multi-billion-dollar business problem that is expected to control the ultimate contours of the use of AI in business. Remember, business operates in a regulatory environment, and we are going to see that these contours are going to be very costly, I would predict. Next slide, please. So I want to talk about the unresolved problem of AI ethical governance and compliance risk management. You might say, well, what's the big problem with creating an AI ethical code? Well, there is a consensus that the process of developing a cogent ethical perspective, a cogent ethical code that addresses the use of AI is a bit more complicated than simply just, writing a bunch of provisions into an ethical code. And the perception is that traditional ethical theories that focus on individual responsibility alone are inadequate now to address the ethics of collective decision-making that involves numerous and oftentimes wholly unrelated participants in the technology domain. The key takeaway here is that for the most part, while we do have some global regulation, ethical guardrails are currently missing. We really don't have a cogent ethical code globally or domestically. We're working on it, but it has not come to fruition as of this date. Next slide, please. So we've talked about current liability in US courts and the legal system, and I want to now move to the global perspective. And again, I want to say that the complexity of defining an ethical code where collective decision-making of unrelated stakeholders is involved is as much a problem in the United States as it is at the global level. But let's consider what is being done at the global level. There are many, many summits and conferences going on, but perhaps one of the most important happened in November of 2023, which was titled the AI Safety Summit. It was hosted in the UK, and it resulted in a treaty being signed called the Bletchley Agreement. And Bletchley was signed by 28 nations, but what's interesting is it was also signed by participants from private industry. Usually treaties are signed by countries and not participants in private industry. So this is really very unique and a sort of a new aspect of these negotiations. You can see that the United States was part of the countries who acted as a signatory, but also take a look. You've got Amazon Web Services, Anthropic, Google, Inflection AI, Meta, Microsoft, Mistral AI, OpenAI, and xAI. So you can see that now the private industry has become a critical stakeholder and player in global treaty negotiations. This is a whole new ballgame. And what the Bletchley Agreement recognizes is this, quote, there is a potential for serious, even catastrophic harm, either deliberate or unintentional, stemming from the most significant capabilities of these AI models. Given the rapid and uncertain rate of change of AI and in the context of the acceleration of investment in the technology, we affirm that deepening our understanding of these potential risks and of actions to address them is especially urgent. So the key takeaway from this global initiative is that these concerns are serious, they're urgent, and they require the participation of stakeholders not based only in countries, but also in the private sector. Next slide, please. Now, let's just look at some of the features of the treaty. It is a call for international oversight, and it's through the use of risk-based assessment formularies. The Bletchley Agreement outlines a specific and focused risk-based regulatory approach with the end goal of providing legislative and regulatory protection to the public through the use of AI. The agreement sets forth these general risk-based principles. First, the need to identify AI safety risks of shared concern, and to do this in the context of a wider global approach to understand the impact of AI on our societies. And secondly, to build respective risk-based policies across countries to ensure safety given these risks, collaborating as appropriate, while recognizing that each country's approach is going to be different based on their national circumstances and their differing legal frameworks. Many of you may recognize this as the concept of treaty harmonization. It allows sovereign nations to come up with their own regulatory response. Next slide, please. Now, the European Union has moved very quickly to develop a 4-tier risk assessment platform and has formalized regulatory guidance in what they call the Artificial Intelligence Act of 2023. It is expected to go into force in 2024 in all EU countries. And, I'll simplify it. Here's how it works. The Act constructs a 4-tier risk model, prioritizing generic risk. Now, the risk level determines the measure of appropriate regulation. So as you can see, there's an acceptable risk for which there's no regulation that can account for it. It's simply outlawed. High risk, which has a range of mandatory legal requirements that will be applied. Limited risk, subject to a limited set of legal obligations. And minimal risk, where it's not expected that there will be any additional legal obligations at all. But sort of the bottom line here is that this will have an obvious impact on jurisdictions outside of the EU seeking to do AI business inside the EU. Next slide, please. Now, the United States has taken a completely different approach. Despite becoming a signatory on the Bletchley Treaty, the U.S. has no pending legislation at the current time. However, the Biden administration did in the past take steps to control the use of AI, but only in the government sector. Now, this is the Executive Order 13859, and it was issued in 2019. So it takes what we call a sectoral risk approach to risk assessment, meaning that we're not prioritizing risk. Instead, each sector or agency of the government is required to assess the risk in its own agency and sphere of regulation, and then decide which of those specific risks need to be addressed by regulation in its own sector. Next slide, please. Now, in 2019, the executive order covered these 4 particular risk categories and engaged all agencies of the federal government to conduct a risk assessment of just these categories on an agency-by-agency basis. So you can see it was not an overwhelmingly broad risk assessment approach. Next slide, please. In 2023, however, another executive order was issued by the Biden administration, and it broadened the risk categories for assessment. Next slide, please. Now, these categories are identified on the slide. The approach still remains sectoral. However, it has broadened. We're going to look at AI safety and security risk in terms of protection of privacy, protection from fraud and abuse. We're going to look at risks to consumers, patients, students, workers, all these stakeholders, all these externalities that are going to be affected by AI, and how AI affects innovation and competition, how it protects, how do we protect consumer and worker rights against the coming of AI, if you will. What are the transformative uses for AI in education and healthcare? We also want to ensure equality and civil rights because we want to prevent what has been proven as algorithmic discrimination. There is proof of it. And we want to ensure responsible government use risk and advance our own leadership abroad. But until Congress acts to review these questions, or the courts start to begin ruling on these pending cases, assuming they're not settled in the interim, the legal and ethical outcomes of this remain a mystery, but a potentially costly one for private industry. And as of this date, only a handful of government agencies have actually crafted any proposed regulations based on a sectoral analysis. Last slide, please. Now, I don't want it to sound like the private sector in the United States is not involved. We saw with the Bletchley Agreement that indeed the private sector is very much involved. The Brookings Institute is one private domestic organization, it's just an example, that has come up with a possible regulatory framework. Now, this regulatory framework includes a dual intervention process, and it's called the Critical Algorithmic Systems Classification System, known as CASC. So, first, federal agencies would be granted subpoena authority to investigate and audit algorithmic decision-making systems, ADSs, that affect processes related to a federal agency's authority. Second, CASC would empower federal agencies to issue and enforce regulations regarding these algorithmic decision-making systems. The CAC framework does not attempt to identify regulatory content, but instead it's simply offering a regulatory framework to allow federal agencies to pursue the task of regulating. It still remains a sectoral approach. And you'll note that nobody's really talking about how to limit AI in the private sector, because in a system of capitalism, that's a very touchy subject and one that the courts and Congress are going to have to deal with. The key takeaway: regulation is clearly favored domestically and globally, but it remains pretty much an unknown in the United States. Technology has outpaced our legal reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Weismann, very much for that presentation. And we're going to go ahead and get started with our second presenter for this afternoon, and that would be Dr. Pouyan Esmaeil Zadeh. So I now turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Weismann, for your very insightful talk on AI and also law. So in the second part, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go through some of the most important AI-based application, but because it's a lot, but we just want to focus on some specific industries, so healthcare and also finance, banking, and something in marketing. So next, please. So in this slide, so I'm going to start with the finance and also banking. So there are lots of AI algorithms. So some of you are familiar with. So because of the time frame, I'm not going to explain it like fundamentally, but there are different types of machine learning, so supervised learning and unsupervised learning that we use in different fields, especially like banking. In banking, we try to use, for example, machine learning, like, for example, to understand some fraudulent transaction, fraud, money laundering. So money laundering and detecting money laundering and also fraud and theft is very important thing in banking and financial and also reporting. So if you just consider machine learning like supervised learning, so each transaction, imagine we have a training data set, so each transaction labeled as fraudulent and non-fraudulent, then the model learns the pattern and characteristic of the transaction that are likely to be fraudulent. So once trained, it can then assess a new transaction and to predict whether that one is likely to be fraudulent or not. If you just consider unsupervised machine learning, so this model are good just at identifying pattern on also anomalies without being told what to look for. So unsupervised model means identifying unusual pattern. So exploring, for example, new type of fraud. So this is another thing. So sometimes you want to look at the non-type of fraud. Sometimes you are looking for new type of fraud. So that's why there's a difference between supervised machine learning and also unsupervised machine learning. So next, please. So in this slide, I just tried to give you one example of the company. So it's called Knot. So Knot is a company that uses machine learning for fraud detection. So this is an essential tool for a modern fintech. So by leveraging both type of machine learning, I mean supervised and unsupervised learning, so the system can analyze vast amount of transaction data to identify patterns that indicate, for example, fraudulent activity or not. So in the supervised model, so the model are trained on historical data. You need to have historical data and with a known outcome. So for example, you're gonna label the historical data fraudulent or, for example, legitimate transaction. Then the model learn to recognize pattern associated with fraud, such as like unusual transaction, for example, amount or frequency. Then it can just be used to predict and flag some future fraudulent transaction. In the unsupervised machine learning, so you try to just identify some new type of outliers and also anomalous, for example, pattern in the transaction data that can be identified at fraud. So the takeaway here is that so we can use AI, so machine learning and unsupervised learning and also supervised learning to detect fraudulent transaction easier and faster and accurately. And the reduce false positive. So one of the things that is very important in AI and algorithm, and there are lots of ethics and there are lots of regulations about this, is the false positive. False positive means that you predict something is fraud. For example, you predict that one transaction is fraud, but actually it's not. So what are the consequences? Lots of like, for example, you damage the reputation of your company. You will have lots of inconvenience for users. So that's why we want to increase the chance of, for example, accurate fraud detection and improving the fraud detection capability for new data. Next, please. So in this one, you're gonna see the company that is called AppZen. So this is another company that automate expense and also invoice management. So it reject non-compliant expenses, cross-checking some cards with invoices, does purchase card audit to prevent misuse, analyze employee spending, so it catches duplicating the spending, translate some foreign receipt, find fraud, find, for example, theft, and the right accurate data-driven response to your account payable emails and save tons of hours for your employees. Next, please. So in this one, I just have two examples for you, if you're interested in banking and financial reporting. So the first one is DataWiser. So DataWiser also use machine learning and also generative AI powered automation. So in order to, so it is an accurate and also fast transaction fraud monitoring tool that can protect good customer experience, capture emerging fraud, minimize fraud loss, detect and investigate and mitigate risk, and also cut off some of the new attack vectors using the most comprehensive fraud platform. And on the right side, you're gonna see there's another company that is called Hyperscience. Also, Hyperscience, it allows users to easily set up and manage a processing of all type of documents, including structured, semi-structured, and also unstructured. Unstructured, something like, for example, your customer feedback, your customer reviews, your customer complaint. And it accurately classify all these different types of documents and making manage a high volume of document variation easy. And it just use machine learning, so as I mentioned before, so to extract data from very complicated documents with the accuracy is 99.5. This is very good. So it automate end-to-end business process, provide accurate actionable data where you need it, and also it understand user intent through sentiment analysis and also natural language processing. Next, please. And in this slide, I have another company for you guys. This is called BioCatch. So BioCatch is one of the best companies that it also use machine learning to detect theft, fraud in order to protect customer asset, maintain organizational reputation, reduce the chance of financial loss and potential legal complication by preventing automated bot fraud. Bot fraud is something that lots of companies are afraid of because there are lots of robotic-like fraud that it may cause lots of inconvenience and also financial fraud, financial loss. So that's why they want to protect this type of occurrences. And also it has features such as like social engineering, scam detection, account opening protection, account takeover protection, and meal account. And especially the thing that is different from the rest is that, so it has some features, especially for money laundering detection. Next, please. And in this slide, and also next slide are just talking about one company that's called Daisy. Daisy is also used, just create like portfolio and also ETF commentary, investor letters, and also marketing to provide like investors with new insight about companies. And also it generates social media sentiment analysis, trend analysis, marketing analysis, and also financial report to give insight on potential investment and also answer some investment question about the stock and something like that. It has a chatbot. So if you go to the website, there's a chatbot. It's called Daisy AI. It's like, for example, ChatGPT. So that you can just, it just trained to give you some investment advice and also factual information to help you understand investment. So next, please. And this is just an example of the company report and how it just gives you some comments about, for example, some company here like ExxonMobil and also Meta Platform, just give you kind of market sentiments and how it can help, for example, investors to invest in this type of companies. So next, please. So this is the company, so AIXYZ. This is the company that just help you with marketing. So it's like, for example, in companies, many companies use chatbot in order to answer frequently asked question or to interact with customer. So why not having an AI agent with your own face, with your own voice, and you can just copy paste your company infrastructure, company like information policies, and whatever you want the AI understand and also answer questions For example, ask if any customer asks any question, so the AI can answer it. So you can just pick for example, the voice that you want, and also you can pick the image or avatar that you want, and you can interact with AI, and also the AI can interact with your customer. Next, please. So let's just talk about some AI in healthcare. So this is the very interesting part. AI can play an important role in healthcare. So this company is called AI Doc. So AI can be used in detecting abnormalities and also health and lots of health issues, especially in radiology. For example, AI can detect any issues, for example, in X-ray, MRI, CT scans, and help radiologists to make the right decision, treatment option, diagnostic option, and also care planning. Next, please. And this is the company is called Page. So this is a company that tried to use AI in order to come up with some, for example, solutions and also some drug for cancer. So it just used machine learning. So it just used medical images and also digital slides in order to classify, for example, cancer, and the accuracy is very high for this specific one. So next, please. And this is called the DeepMind. This is a Google DeepMind, a company just owned by Google. And this company use AI to predict and also come up with some diagnosis and treatment option and clinical planning for 50 different types of eye orders. So you just need to you need to upload the image of the eyes, and gonna give you some treatment option and care planning, and the accuracy rate is very high. Next, please. And so one of the things that we usually do whenever, for example, people develop with some sign and symptom like unexplained, like for example, unexplained weight loss or high blood pressure, what is the first thing they do? They Google it, right? When you Google it, the problem is that you're gonna refer to lots of unreliable and also some website that the information is not valid or some outdated. So that's why there are lots of AI company like this company that you can see here, that you can just put your sign and symptom, you can enter your sign and symptom, and the website and the AI gonna give you, for example, the right option and also the right diagnosis and also care planning for you. So instead of Googling or asking ChatGPT, because ChatGPT is not designed for healthcare, so you need to have some type of AI algorithm that is fine-tuned using historical health data. So this company, DocUs AI, is something that people can use in order to enter sign and symptom and just get some, for example, assistant from AI. Next, please. And this is the previous one. It was a patient-facing application. This is the provider-facing application. It's called Glass.Health. So Glass.Health is something that gonna help, for example, providers or doctors using machine learning and also large language model in order to generate some differential diagnosis and care planning and also clinical problem. It's gonna give some professional advice to providers. For example, if you have some sign and symptoms of XYZ, so the AI gonna generate some clinical, for example, reports, and then so this is up to the doctor what to decide at the end. Next, please. And this is exactly one of the screenshot of the same application. As you can see here, for example, doctor just enter the sign and symptom. Here is said, for example, 70-year-old male with a story of MI present and lots of other sign and symptom. They're gonna generate, first of all, some diagnosis option and also some clinical plan. So it can be a kind of help and assistance for providers and doctors to just have kind of, for example, assistant from AI based on machine learning. Next, please. And here, this is another movement in healthcare is that AI can help, for example, research and development in healthcare industry in order to discover new drugs. And they do it just based on some, for example, historical data. And also, if you go to the next slide, I can just show you in this slide, because this is just okay. Here you can see that on the left side, so the AI can get some information about, for example, your DNA or genetic information, or your past historical data, or your, for example, images, and your lifestyle. And then based on machine learning, so you're gonna generate some visualization and figures, and also data analysis, and to generate personalized medication for you, and it's designed only for you. Next, please. And this is so in this in couple of slides, so I'm gonna just talk about some chatbots. So AI based chatbot is another movement in healthcare, that, for example, there are lots of chatbot that you can talk to chatbot. So many people don't want to go to a psychiatrist or psychologist because of a stigma or something like that. So there are lots of chatbot these days that are designed for chronic, for example, physical diseases or mental diseases. So stress management, anxiety. So you can just chat with that AI, and gonna give you some diagnosis and also treatment options. So this company is called Pouyan. So next one. And this company is called Sensely. So as you can see on the right side, the avatar or the chatbot, the virtual assistant of the company is called Molly. So Molly, you can chat with Molly, and just it can just design based on empathy-driven conversational platform. It can answer your question with understanding you. So the more you chat, the more AI understands you and gonna give you the best, for example, care planning. Next. In next slide, we're gonna have another conversational AI is called Uper. So there are lots of conversational AI designed for mental health, as I mentioned. So lots of people don't want to go to like psychologists or psychiatrists because of a stigma, or because of any reason, cost or convenience. So this is the alternative for them. So they can use conversational AI. So it has lots of tests, for example, mental health conditions, anxiety tests, so panic tests, depression tests, and also PTSD tests. And so if you go to next slide, the company is called Uper, but there are lots of other types of conversational AI, like, for example, Vobot or Replica. This company itself is called Uper. So as you can see here on the right side, you just start chatting with the AI assistant. And for example, you start with how are you feeling, and you just answer one question, and just, for example, you're gonna say for example, anxious, and you're gonna, how can I help you with different types of program, for example, stop worrying or performance, or for example something like if you want to set a goal for like phase-based or something like that, or you have a kind of phobia, or you want to face your fear or reframe your thoughts, something like kind of type of like medication for mental health. Next one, please. And so let's just talk about robots. So robots can play also an important role in healthcare. So on the right side, you can see the surgical kit is called Da Vinci surgical system. That so the surgeon can just handle and manage all these surgical arms, and it can be used for lots of surgery, like prostate surgery and also cardiac valve repair. On the right side, so Mako is another robotic assisted surgery. So it's mainly used for joint replacement surgery. But what I'm trying to say is that robotic surgery is another trending thing in healthcare that lots of, for example, healthcare provider might use robotic surgery and surgical system in order to, for example, do surgery easier and faster. Next. And this is a companion robot. So companion robot, so this is another type of robotics in healthcare. So we have lots of physical companion robot, especially for the elderly, for seniors. So this type for the on the right side, you can see LEQ, and the left side LEQ is mainly conversational. It just also suggests some activities to tell some jokes, and also it has a feature is called medication reminder. For example, if seniors forget, for example, the medication, so we're gonna give some medication reminder. And also on the left side, Pepper is the Japanese, is from the Japanese company. So, and also you just try to engage seniors in conversation. So if they feel lonely, so I'll also provide lots of social and also emotional support and lots of other activities. Next. And so what I'm trying to finish with, so if I want to wrap it up, there are lots of opportunities. There are lots of, for example, changes that AI can do and can make. But as Dr. Weismann also mentioned, there are lots of ethics, there are lots of regulatory issues that we need to address. Something like transparency, something like explainability. So many people don't want to use AI because it's not transparent. It's like the black box. I don't understand how the system works, right? So that's one of the problems. Reliability and also the accuracy, as I mentioned. So accuracy is one of the most important thing in AI. So because we want to minimize false, for example, positive and also false negative. So this is another thing related to reliability and accuracy and also error. So there are lots of ethical considerations. So, but I just want to just make it very quick, like because your AI is trained on some data. So your data set, if your data set, you have lots of bias, you have lots of noise, we have lots of noise or abnormalities. So your AI recommendation also is biased toward a specific group of people. And also AI can manipulate, for example, consumer behavior. If you use AI in AI-driven, for example, platform in your marketing, so just use coercive tactic in order to manipulate consumer behavior. And the privacy, definitely, because AI is based on data, and the AI algorithms are data hungry. So the more data, the better AI algorithm works. So that's why the privacy concern is important. So we are not sure what type of data is collected, and we are not sure how the data is exchanged or disclosed. And the last one, please. So we're gonna finish out the talk with some of other challenges and concern. So yeah, AI is good, but one of the problems is that so lots of people are concerned about over reliance on AI. So you use AI too much. If you use AI too much for anything, like in healthcare, in banking, or whatever, so it's good, but you're gonna literally gradually gonna lose some of your critical, for example, thinking, and also some of your problem solving skills. So, and then regulatory approval that we already talked about it. So I don't want to speak about it anymore. So then having reliable and clean data, because as I mentioned, if data is wrong, it's inaccurate, is biased, so all the algorithm, it just follow up the same thing, and the result is going to be biased and wrong. And how are we going to integrate AI in the workflow? For example, how are we going to integrate AI in healthcare, in banking, in marketing? That's another thing that you need to address. That's another challenge. And the last thing, so AI can replace lots of jobs. Yes, definitely. AI can replace lots of repetitive job, mundane job, but at the same time, AI also create lots of new jobs. So that's why many people are concerned about, for example, losing their job, and is a decent concern. But at the same time, AI gonna generate lots of new jobs like data analytics, writing AI, for example, engineers or something like that. Thank you very much.
All right, and thank you as well, Dr. Pouyan Esmaeil Zadeh and Dr. Miriam Weismann. We had this webinar slotted to go until 2 p.m., but we're going to make some time here for some questions. So what I would encourage you to do is go ahead and put those into the chat. And so I have one question here, depending on who wants to take it, but the question is, any examples of AI extracting information from documents and inputting it into another system to facilitate legal work, for example?
Well, let me just say briefly, the lawyers who have used AI in their briefs have been punished by the courts because of the point that Dr. Pouyan just made, over-reliance on AI. They've extracted the information, put it into their briefs, and filed the briefs without actually determining if the cases they're citing are real. And as it turned out, the cases weren't real. So it can be deleterious in that regard. I hope I answered your question.
So I have another question here. Are boot camps available in AI related to the subject?
What kind of boot camps are we talking about in academia? I mean, certainly in our master's programs, we do conduct boot camps as part of our master's education. And I'm sure you can find AI training all over the internet. It seems to be very prevalent.
Yes, it would be academic.
Oh, well, in academia, yes. I mean, we give boot camps for many kinds of quantitative disciplines. For example, we do Excel, we do Tableau, we do AI. I mean, it's all part of exposing our students to new technology. And we try to put guardrails around the use of AI in the classroom, because that is also another area that is just not fully understood at this point. And we're trying to avoid cheating and plagiarism and all these other issues. So there's a good side of AI and there's a wicked side of AI. So we're trying to deal with both.
All right. I have a few more questions that are coming through. So if a lawyer wanted to enter the field of AI litigation, what would be good next steps?
Oh, well, you got to learn to be a techie, because, in order to really get into the field, not only do you have to have a clear understanding of how AI works, but you've got to be able to explain it to a jury. You've got to be able to, be an English to English translator, to be able to translate the science to an understandable way. And also, it's going to be hard because this is going to be a battle of experts. This is going to be like other technological cases. It's going to be a battle of experts. So you're going to have to find reliable experts in the field. But in response to your question, you're going to have a lot of background knowledge in this technology in order to go into the field.
Okay. Next question. How do you foresee the use of AI for governmental jobs?
Well, I think that's part of the sectoral approach that the government is following right now on an agency by agency basis, to determine where AI is useful with the agency, where it's dangerous, and then for the sector to for that agency to engage in rulemaking to control the use of AI in that sector. But I think more and more federal agencies are going to have to hire people with that kind of AI background. I think Dr. Pouyan makes a point that you're going to lose jobs, but also gain jobs. And I think this is one area where you can expect to gain jobs. They need experts too.
Okay, and someone had asked a follow-up question. So it says here, my question is more extracting information from a demand letter and inputting it into a matter management system, not for writing pleadings or documents that are going to be filling or are going to be filing with the courts.
I can't really address that question because I don't know of a situation where that has occurred. It may have occurred, but I'm not aware of it.
I'm not very expert in like legal domain, but there are some like AI that can help you to predict legal outcomes. So I know one company is called Lex Machina. So if I'm not mistaken, so it's Lex Machina. So this company use AI and predictive analysis to draw insight on judges, lawyers, and also legal cases itself to predict behavior and outcome by offering legal like analytics. And also it provides user-friendly flows and rich data visualization and help law firm and companies create like successful strategy and win cases, and whether to take a case on contingency or whether to advise their client to settle. But again, is not the completely solid legal outcome. But to address your question, this is the one that I'm kind of familiar, kind of legal analytics that help, for example, companies win. It's called Lex Machina. You can just Google it and get more information.
Okay, and I guess this question also for the both of you, if somebody can answer it, will FIU be offering an AI executive certificate soon?
Yeah, we will do that. So exactly. So we will do a AI executive certificate soon. So hopefully, I'm not sure when the time frame is it. But we're gonna have like 8-week, if I'm not mistaken. So 8-week class for executives. So just have different modules that are gonna help executive if they want to integrate AI into their workflow. So it's gonna be soon. I'm not sure when, but I think it's gonna be summer.
Okay. Thank you. Is utilizing AI for legal processes taught at FIU Law?
Well, at this point, I can't really answer for a particular course, but there is no individual course on AI. But I can imagine that, for example, in antitrust litigation, in copyright litigation, I know I teach a course where we talk about AI in terms of tort law and tort liability. But again, it's kind of hard to teach it when the law is so unsettled, because the most you can say is, well, we can't hold robots or non-sentient beings liable, but what's going to happen when that known risk causes a harm? And so we just really don't have the legal answers right now. But it does raise this copyright issue. And I think in the Microsoft case, if the court rules in that case, we're going to start seeing the development of law through the court system. And I think, like a lot of other areas in this country, I think the courts are going to start developing it before Congress does. That's my expectation.
Okay. Follow-up question. Is the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services regulating AI usage in healthcare? Is it regulatory or advisory, as in not related to FDA and devices? I'm talking from the clinical side for Medicare recipients and billing.
I'm not aware of any new issuance of regulations from CMS regarding the use of AI in healthcare. And also, I work with a lot of hospitals in South Florida. I'm not aware of many hospitals that are actually using AI on a regular basis. And I think there are some legitimate concerns about safety and data protection and all of these other issues that, the black box issue has not been resolved. There's not a lot of transparency yet.
Okay, thank you. And I just have one other question. Again, I thought this question was asked before, but again, is there going to be an FIU executive certificate of AI in healthcare? So that's a slightly different question. Anything being developed at FIU currently?
We are in our healthcare MBA program. We have a number of certifications in addition to the MBA degree. And one of the certifications that we are looking at is to add a certificate in AI. For example, we have a certificate in Tableau. We have a certificate in advanced marketing and global travel. And so what we're considering doing now is to add that to the residency part of the program and provide certification.
Okay. I do not see any. Oh, here's one other question, perhaps. the individuals just saying great presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So thank you again, both of you. And as a reminder, this presentation has been recorded and it will be shared with the participants. But I guess maybe just as a courtesy to everybody, we're going to stick around another 5 minutes. So if anybody has any questions, please go ahead and put them through.
Someone asked about how we can learn about the executive education certificate in AI. So we are developing. Actually, we are in the progress of developing AI certificate for executives. So we're gonna announce it soon on our FIU website. So we're gonna see the module and all the details soon. We are still developing this.
All right. I do not see any other questions. Okay. Again, just another couple more minutes.
Yeah, it's gonna be announced in. So someone asked, what do you mean by website? So FIU Business School website. So the
Yeah.
Department of Information System and Business Analytics. So FIU Business School, Information System and Business Analytics. So someone asked any opportunities to get involved in the development of the certificate. I'm not sure what does this mean. I mean, you mean you want to be involved in development? So you want to be one of the like one of the organizers? So I really don't know. I really don't know. I'm just one person in this program. There are lots of other people, so I really don't know if there is a chance. But we already have all our professors involved and the modules already assigned. So that's what I remember. That's what I know so far.
Okay. Well, I don't see any other questions, so I think we're all done. So again, thank you everybody for attending. Thank you for your interest in FIU's programs, and have a great week, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.